Mountain Man knocked and said, "They told me you're alone. Let me give you sons, woman." The air was always fresh, and the mornings were filled with the sound of birds singing. Amina's house was modest, made of stones and wood, with a small garden in front where she grew vegetables and flowers. The house had been hers for many years, and though it was simple, it held memories and comfort. It was the place where she felt safe, even though life had not always been kind to her. Many years ago, Amina had been married. Her husband had been a kind man, full of laughter and dreams. Together, they had imagined a life filled with love and family, but fate had taken him away far too soon. A sudden illness had struck and he passed away, leaving Amina alone. At first, the emptiness had been unbearable. The house felt too quiet, and every corner reminded her of the times they had shared. She missed the sound of his voice, the warmth of his presence, and the comfort of knowing someone was always there for her. Over time, Amina learned to live with her loneliness. She found ways to keep her mind busy, and her days became routines of small but meaningful tasks. She woke up early every morning to tend to her garden. She loved the feeling of soil in her hands, planting seeds and watching them grow. It gave her a sense of purpose. She cared for a few goats, which provided milk and cheese that she either kept for herself or sold in the village market. She also made bread and simple meals, enjoying the quiet rhythm of life that came from working with her own hands. Despite her solitude, Amina was never completely isolated. The villagers respected her and often came to her for advice or help. She had a reputation for being strong, wise, and kind. People knew that if they faced difficulties, Amina could offer guidance or simply a listening ear. Children loved visiting her garden, sometimes sneaking fruits or vegetables when she wasn't looking. She would laugh and chase them gently, enjoying their energy and innocence. These small interactions brought a kind of warmth into her life, though they could never replace the companionship she had once known. Even with her busy days, there were moments when loneliness crept in. In the evenings, as the sun set behind the mountains and the sky turned shades of orange and pink, Amina often sat by her window, gazing at the distant hills. She remembered how it used to feel to have someone to share her thoughts with, someone to laugh with, or even just sit in silence with. Sometimes, she imagined what it would be like to hear laughter in her home again, or the sound of children running around her garden. She didn't expect miracles, but she allowed herself to hope, quietly and carefully, for small joys to enter her life again. Her life had its challenges too. Winters were harsh in the mountains. Snow would cover the village, and the cold winds would seep through the cracks of her home. She had to make sure her firewood was enough, and that the goats were safe and warm. There were times when the paths became slippery with ice, making even simple trips to the market dangerous. Yet, Amina never complained. She had learned resilience. She understood that life was full of difficulties, and the only way to survive was to face them with courage and patience. Despite all the hardships, there was something beautiful about her life. The mountains were her constant companions. She knew every path, every tree, and every hidden spring in the area. She could predict the weather by watching the clouds or feeling the wind. She loved the quiet moments when the world seemed still, and she felt connected to something bigger than herself. The birds, the trees, the flowing streams, they all seemed like friends in her solitude. These simple wonders reminded her that life, even when lonely, could be rich and meaningful. Amina also had a curious mind. She loved listening to travelers who passed through the village, sharing stories of distant lands, people, and adventures. Though she had never traveled far herself, she imagined those places vividly. In her mind, she walked through bustling towns, colorful markets, and green fields that stretched endlessly. These stories added color to her life, giving her small escapes from the routine of daily chores. They reminded her that the world was vast, full of surprises, and perhaps even opportunities for change. In the village, Amina's name was spoken with respect. People admired how she carried herself, strong and independent. Young women sometimes asked her how she managed life alone, and she would smile and offer advice about resilience, self-reliance, and the importance of finding joy in small things. She didn't speak much about her sorrow, but when she did, it was gentle, filled with lessons about courage and hope. Her life, though quiet and solitary, had meaning. She had learned that strength was not always about being fearless, but about facing each day with determination, even when the heart felt heavy. And yet, deep inside, a small part of Amina still longed for something more. She wished for companionship, not necessarily for love in the way stories often described it, but for a presence that could share the daily joys and struggles with her. She imagined conversations that lasted late into the night, laughter echoing through the walls of her home, and the simple comfort of having someone there. It was not weakness to feel this, it was human. And Amina allowed herself to feel it, quietly nurturing the hope that life still had surprises in store for her. Most days passed peacefully. She tended to her garden, cared for her animals, and interacted with villagers. Yet sometimes, when she walked along the mountain paths alone, she felt the vastness of her solitude. The wind would brush against her face, carrying the scent of pine and earth, and she would pause to listen to the quiet hum of the mountains. In these moments, she felt both small and significant. Small because the mountains were immense and timeless. Significant because she had carved a life for herself here, enduring and thriving despite loss. Amina's routine, while simple, was full of unnoticed beauty. She enjoyed baking bread in the early morning when the first rays of sunlight lit her kitchen. She loved watching the goats play in the field, their cheerful bleating a reminder of life's small joys. She took walks along hidden paths, discovering flowers or stones she hadn't noticed before. These small acts brought her peace. She realized that life did not have to be dramatic or filled with excitement to be meaningful. There was value in stability, in small victories, and in the quiet moments of reflection. As the sun set each day, Amina often sat by the fire with a cup of tea, thinking about her life. She reflected on her past, on the love she had lost, and on the strength she had found within herself. She knew she had grown resilient, independent, and capable. She understood that her solitude was not a punishment, but a space to rebuild, to nurture herself, and to prepare for whatever life might bring next. Though the future was unknown, she had hope that change could come in its own time. And so Amina continued her life, quietly, steadily, and with a heart open to possibility. She had learned that even in solitude, one could find purpose, joy, and beauty. The mountains were her companions, her home was her sanctuary, and her life, though simple, was hers to shape. Little did she know, the quiet days she had grown accustomed to were about to be touched by an unexpected presence, one that would challenge everything she thought she knew about life, companionship, and hope. One crisp morning, as Amina stepped outside to collect water from the village well, she noticed an unfamiliar figure standing near her gate. The man was tall, with broad shoulders, and his clothes looked worn from long travels through the mountains. His hair was dark and slightly tangled, and his eyes, sharp yet calm, held a sense of experience that came only from years of living in the wilderness. For a moment, Amina froze, unsure whether to call out or retreat. Strangers were rare in her village, especially in this remote area where life moved slowly and quietly. The man lifted his hand slightly, as if in greeting. "Good morning," he said, his voice low but steady. "My name is Dara. I've traveled a long way and I was told that you live alone here." Amina blinked, surprised by his directness. There was something unusual in his words, almost strange, yet there was no hint of danger. Dara seemed confident but not aggressive, as if he had faced harsh conditions many times and had learned to respect others. Amina studied him cautiously. "Yes," she replied carefully, "I live alone. What brings you here? Her voice was steady, but her mind raced. Visitors were rare in the village, and most were merchants or travelers passing through quickly. This man seemed different. There was an air of purpose about him, a kind of determination that made her pause. Dara smiled faintly. "I heard from others in nearby villages that you live by yourself. I wanted to meet you and offer help if you needed it." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "I can work, help with your animals, repair your house, anything you need. I also want to help you rebuild a life that may feel lonely." Amina's eyes widened. His words were bold, almost shocking. She had lived alone for many years, and the thought of someone speaking so openly about companionship startled her. Yet there was no pressure in his voice, only an honest offer. She had always believed in self-reliance, and yet a small part of her was curious. Could this stranger truly offer more than just physical help? Could he bring warmth back into her quiet life? "Why would you do that?" Amina asked after a pause, her voice cautious but not unkind. She had learned to protect herself, and sudden offers of help often carried hidden motives. "Why come all this way to help me?" Dara's gaze softened. "Because I believe life is meant to be shared. I've seen too many people struggle alone, and I don't want to see another good person live in solitude if I can help. It is not about taking or asking for anything. I only wish to offer support. If you refuse, I will understand. But if you accept, I promise to work honestly and with respect." Amina felt a mixture of surprise and confusion. She had never met anyone like Dara. Most villagers respected her independence, but no one had ever approached her like this. His words were unusual, almost like they came from a different world, one where people truly helped others without expecting anything in return. She studied him for a while, noticing the sincerity in his eyes. There was no trickery there, no rush to convince her. Only patience, strength, and something almost comforting. Finally, she spoke. "You may stay for a few days if you like, but you must understand this is my home and I value my privacy." Dara nodded, accepting her conditions without complaint. He set down a small sack of belongings he had carried and followed her inside, careful to respect her space. Amina showed him the house, explaining the chores that needed attention, the goats, the garden, and the repairs that had been postponed due to the winter storms. Dara listened carefully, asking questions politely, never assuming or taking control. Over the next few days, Dara proved his words were true. He helped repair the roof where the tiles had loosened, carried firewood, and even fixed the old fence around the garden. He was strong, efficient, and careful, and he worked silently, never demanding attention or praise. Amina observed him closely, realizing that his presence was slowly changing the atmosphere in her home. Tasks that had once felt heavy and tiring now seemed lighter with his help. The house felt less empty. Even the goats seemed more comfortable with another human around, following him curiously as he fed them and cleaned their pen. Despite the practical work, Dara also spent time talking to Amina, not in a way that rushed her into friendship, but in a calm, respectful manner. He shared stories of his life in the high mountains, describing the challenges he had faced, the storms he had survived, and the lessons he had learned from nature. He spoke about the forests, the rivers, and the quiet strength one could find in living closely with the land. Amina listened, intrigued. His words reminded her of the world beyond the village, of adventures she had never experienced but had always imagined. As the days passed, a bond began to form. It was subtle, built on trust and shared effort. Amina found herself laughing at Dara's small jokes and clever observations. She realized she looked forward to his presence, not because she needed someone to take care of her, but because his company made life feel richer. She began to share her own stories, memories of her husband, lessons she had learned from living alone, and the small joys she found in everyday tasks. Dara listened patiently, never interrupting, always showing respect for her thoughts and feelings. The villagers noticed the change too. Some were curious, wondering why a stranger had come and stayed for so long. Others whispered cautiously, unsure if this could be a good thing or a source of trouble. But Amina paid little attention to gossip. She had learned that life was about the choices she made for herself, not the opinions of others. Dara's presence, rather than overwhelming her, fit naturally into her routine. It was comforting, not demanding, and that made it easier for her to accept. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Amina and Dara sat outside, watching the sky turn shades of pink and gold. The air was cool, carrying the scent of pine and fresh earth. Dara broke the silence gently. "I know I am new here and it may feel strange to have someone in your home, but I want you to know, I do not wish to impose. I only wish to help you feel less alone, in whatever way you feel comfortable." Amina felt a strange warmth in her chest. His words were not dramatic or overwhelming, but they carried honesty and a kind of care she had almost forgotten existed. She realized that she did not feel fear or distrust around him anymore. Instead, she felt a spark of hope that perhaps life could still offer surprises, and that companionship did not have to come with expectations or pressure. Over the next weeks, Amina began to notice small changes in herself. She smiled more easily, her steps were lighter, and her work, though still hard, felt less like a burden. Dara's presence had brought structure, support, and quiet comfort to her life. She even began to anticipate his advice on repairs or tasks, appreciating his knowledge and skill. More importantly, she discovered that she could trust him, not blindly but carefully and with her own judgment. Through these days, Amina realized something important. Companionship was not about filling a void with noise or distraction. It was about sharing life with someone who respected your space, supported your needs, and could walk beside you through both challenges and simple joys. Dara did not rush her, did not demand her attention, and did not question her independence. Instead, he offered a partnership that felt natural, honest, and freeing. One morning, as they worked together in the garden, Dara paused and looked at Amina seriously. "I know I have only been here a short time," he said, "but I hope that in time, we can face life's challenges together if you allow me. I am not asking for anything immediate, only that you consider that no one has to be completely alone if they do not wish to be." Amina looked at him, feeling a mixture of surprise, curiosity, and cautious hope. She realized that life had already begun to change in small, meaningful ways. The days of complete solitude were behind her, but not because she had given up her independence. They were behind her because she had opened a small door, a door that could lead to shared strength, trust, and new possibilities. The villagers continued their quiet watch, some whispering, some admiring, but Amina no longer noticed. Her focus had shifted to the present, to the work in her garden, the repaired walls of her house, and the shared quiet moments with Dara. She felt alive in ways she had not in years. The small, daily routines of life were now colored by the presence of another human being, someone who understood that life was fragile, beautiful, and worth facing together. And though she did not yet know what the future would hold, Amina felt a sense of readiness, a quiet excitement for what might come next. She had learned that unexpected visits could bring not just help, but hope. She had learned that trust could be rebuilt carefully, and that companionship could arrive in forms that were respectful, gentle, and life-changing. Little did she know that Dara's arrival was only the beginning of a journey that would test her courage, patience, and heart in ways she had never imagined. But for now, in the quiet of the mountains, she allowed herself to feel something she had not felt in years, possibility. Days turned into weeks, and Amina's life began to change in ways she had never expected. Dara stayed as he had promised, quietly helping with chores, repairing the old wooden fences, and taking care of the goats during early mornings and late evenings. At first, Amina had been careful to keep boundaries, but she gradually realized that his presence did not crowd her. Instead, it brought a sense of balance to her quiet home. She noticed that the house, once silent and lonely, now carried a subtle warmth. The walls seemed less cold, and even the garden seemed livelier as they worked side by side. One morning, Amina walked to the field to check on the goats, and Dara followed her, carrying a basket of feed. The sun had just begun to rise, casting golden light over the mountains. Birds sang from the treetops, and the morning air was crisp with the promise of a new day. Amina noticed how carefully Dara moved, ensuring the goats were comfortable before placing the feed in their pen. It was a small thing, but it spoke volumes about his character, his respect for life, his patience, and his thoughtfulness. She smiled to herself, realizing that these small gestures were quietly changing the rhythm of her days. As they worked together, their conversations grew longer and more personal. Dara asked about her past, not in a prying way but in a gentle, interested tone. Amina found herself opening up about her husband, the life she had shared with him, and the years of solitude that followed. She spoke of her struggles, her triumphs, and the simple joys she had found in caring for her home and animals. Dara listened intently, never interrupting, offering nods of understanding and occasional words of encouragement. His presence made her feel heard and valued, something she had not felt for a long time. The villagers noticed the change too. Children who once ran past her gate now paused, watching the two of them work together. Some women whispered to one another, curious about the newcomer and the woman who had been so fiercely independent for many years. But Amina paid little attention to gossip. She knew that her life was her own, and she did not need to justify the changes she allowed to enter it. Dara's presence was a gift, not a scandal, and she was determined to see it that way. One afternoon, a small challenge tested their partnership. A sudden rainstorm swept down from the mountains, catching them while they were repairing the roof. The wind was strong, and heavy drops of rain made the tiles slippery. Amina felt a pang of fear as she tried to steady herself on the sloping roof. Dara quickly moved beside her, offering support without taking control. "Hold my hand for a moment," he said calmly, "and we'll finish this safely together." Trusting him, Amina allowed herself to be guided. Together they worked carefully, balancing, adjusting tiles, and securing loose wood. By the time the storm passed, they were both soaked, but the roof was fixed, and Amina realized something important. She had come to trust him not just for his strength, but for his patience and calm presence. After the storm, as they sat under the shelter of a nearby tree, Dara handed Amina a dry cloth to wipe the rain from her face. She looked at him, and for the first time, she felt a sense of true partnership. This was not a man imposing on her life or taking over her routines. This was someone who respected her abilities, shared her burdens, and offered help when needed. It was a new experience for Amina, one that made her heart feel lighter and her mind more open. In the following days, they began to share more than work. Dara taught her small skills he had learned in the mountains, how to find fresh water in hidden streams, how to read the clouds for weather predictions, and even how to repair simple tools with minimal materials. Amina found herself fascinated by his knowledge, appreciating the way he combined practicality with careful observation. In turn, she taught him about the rhythms of her village, the habits of her goats, and the best ways to tend to her garden. Together, they discovered that learning from one another could be both practical and joyful. Evenings became a time of quiet reflection and conversation. They would sit by the fire, sipping warm tea, and watch the sun dip behind the mountains. Dara shared stories of his life, how he had survived storms, climbed difficult paths, and faced hardships in the wilderness. Amina shared memories of her younger days, the laughter she had known with her husband, and the lessons of resilience she had learned from years of solitude. These moments, simple yet profound, began to knit a connection between them. It was not instant friendship, but something deeper, built on trust, respect, and the recognition that life was better shared. Amina also noticed changes in herself. She laughed more easily, even at small things, a joke Dara made, a goat's playful antics, or the beauty of flowers in her garden. She felt more energetic and alive, as though the days had gained new meaning. Dara's presence did not diminish her independence. Instead, it enhanced it. She realized that accepting help was not weakness, and that companionship could exist without compromising her autonomy. Life, she understood, could be a balance of self-reliance and shared support. Their partnership faced another test when one of the goats fell ill. Amina had always managed such situations alone, but this time she allowed Dara to assist. He observed carefully, then helped her prepare a simple remedy using herbs and techniques he had learned in the mountains. Together, they nursed the goat back to health. The experience strengthened their bond, showing Amina that relying on another person did not mean losing control. It meant gaining support and learning from someone else's experience. As the weeks passed, the villagers began to see Amina differently. Some admired her courage in allowing someone new into her life, while others remained cautious, uncertain about the changes. Amina, however, no longer worried about their opinions. Her focus was on the life she was building with Dara, a life that balanced solitude with companionship, work with learning, and challenges with shared solutions. She had found a rhythm that was fulfilling and sustainable, one that respected both her independence and her desire for connection. Amina also began to imagine possibilities for the future she had not dared to consider before. She thought about the warmth of shared meals, laughter echoing in her home, and even the idea of passing on her knowledge and skills to others. Dara's presence had awakened a part of her she had almost forgotten, the part that believed life could still offer growth, joy, and meaningful connections. She realized that while solitude had taught her strength, companionship could teach her trust, hope, and the beauty of shared experiences. One evening, as they watched the sunset together, Dara spoke gently. "I have been here for some time now, and I feel we understand each other better with each passing day. I do not want to rush anything or make you uncomfortable. But I hope that we can continue to face life together, side by side." Amina looked at him thoughtfully, recognizing the sincerity in his words. She felt a quiet warmth in her heart, not of sudden passion, but of trust, respect, and the realization that life could feel lighter when shared. Amina realized that the connection she had developed with Dara was unlike anything she had experienced before. It was not about romantic notions or immediate attachment. It was about a partnership built on understanding, patience, and mutual care. She began to see life through a different lens, one in which she could maintain her independence while embracing the support and companionship of another person. The idea was both thrilling and comforting, filling her with hope for the days to come. Through this process, Amina discovered that companionship could be gradual, natural, and deeply fulfilling. She no longer feared change or uncertainty. Instead, she embraced it with curiosity and careful optimism. Dara had become a steady presence in her life, someone she could rely on without losing herself. The once silent house now felt alive with energy, laughter, and the simple joy of shared work and conversation. Amina understood that life's richness did not come only from achievement or independence, but from connection, trust, and the willingness to open one's heart to others. As part 3 comes to a close, Amina and Dara's bond had grown stronger, grounded in trust, respect, and shared experiences. The quiet life she had once known was evolving, not through dramatic events, but through steady, meaningful interactions that nurtured hope and possibility. Life in the mountains remained challenging, but together, they faced each day with courage, learning that even the smallest acts of cooperation and understanding could transform loneliness into companionship and resilience into strength. Little did Amina know, Life was preparing her for challenges that would test the depth of their partnership, the strength of her heart, and the courage she had built over years of solitude. But for now, she could simply enjoy the present, a life slowly blooming with trust, learning, and the quiet power of human connection. Winter arrived in the mountains with its usual intensity, bringing snow, biting winds, and long nights. The once golden hills were now blanketed in white, and the village seemed quieter than ever. Amina and Dara had grown accustomed to working together, sharing chores and tending to the goats and garden. But the cold months always tested their endurance. Firewood had to be collected in larger quantities, water sources sometimes froze, and the harsh weather made simple tasks much more difficult. Still, they faced each day together, learning from each other and supporting one another through the challenges. One morning, a heavy snowstorm began unexpectedly. The wind howled through the trees, shaking the wooden beams of Amina's house. Snow piled against the walls and the roof, threatening to collapse under its weight. Amina had seen storms before, but something about this one felt stronger, fiercer. The goats were restless in their pen, and the garden was buried beneath layers of ice and snow. She turned to Dara, a mixture of worry and determination in her eyes. "We need to secure everything," she said. "The storm is worse than usual." Dara nodded calmly, already grabbing tools and ropes. "Don't worry, we can handle this, but we must work carefully. The wind is strong and the snow is heavy. One wrong step could be dangerous." Amina appreciated his calm presence. Even in the midst of fear, Dara's confidence gave her a sense of security. They divided tasks, checking the roof, reinforcing the goat pen, and securing windows against the wind. Each movement required focus, patience, and coordination. As the day progressed, the storm intensified. Snow fell in thick layers, covering everything in sight. The path to the village was nearly invisible, and the winds made voices difficult to hear. Amina felt the weight of worry pressing on her shoulders. What if the roof collapsed? What if the goats got hurt? But Dara's steady presence beside her reminded her to focus on one task at a time. He guided her carefully across the slippery surfaces, holding her hand when she needed support and offering instructions in a calm, clear voice. At one point, a loud crack echoed across the house. A branch, heavy with snow, had broken and fallen near the garden fence. Amina froze, but Dara quickly assessed the situation. "It's all right," he said. "We can fix this. Stay here and keep the goats safe. I'll handle the branch." Watching him work with such skill and care, Amina felt a deep sense of trust. She realized that she relied not only on his strength, but also on his ability to stay calm and think clearly under pressure. The hours passed slowly. Their clothes were soaked, their hands raw from the cold, but they continued to work side by side. Amina marveled at how naturally they had learned to communicate. Without needing many words, they understood each other's movements and intentions. Dara would hand her a rope just as she needed it, and she would adjust a fence panel while he balanced the tools for her. The silent rhythm of their teamwork was comforting. Even in the harshness of the storm, Amina felt a sense of partnership she had never experienced before. By evening, the storm showed no signs of letting up. Snow drifts blocked their usual paths, and the temperature dropped further. Amina and Dara lit a fire inside the house, doing their best to dry their clothes and warm themselves. They shared a simple meal of bread, cheese, and warm tea, grateful for small comforts amid the chaos outside. Sitting together by the fire, Amina realized how much she had come to depend on Dara, not in a way that made her weak, but in a way that made her stronger. His presence allowed her to face challenges with courage, knowing she was not alone. That night, as the wind rattled the windows, they talked quietly about the future. "Storms like this remind us how fragile life can be," Dara said softly. "But they also show how much stronger we are when we face them together." Amina nodded, feeling the truth of his words. She thought about all the years she had spent alone, handling hardships by herself. Though she had survived, she realized that life could be richer when shared. Trust and companionship were not just comforts, they were tools that helped them endure and grow. The next morning brought even more challenges. The snow had piled higher, and the roof had begun to sag under the weight. Dara immediately suggested clearing it, but the task was dangerous. Amina knew it would require courage, balance, and careful coordination. They worked methodically, clearing snow bit by bit, supporting each other as they went. Several times, Amina felt herself slipping, but Dara's hand was always there to steady her. It was exhausting, frightening, and yet empowering. She realized that facing danger together had deepened their bond in ways that words could not describe. During the storm, they also faced a small emergency with the goats. One of them, frightened by the howling wind, tried to escape the pen. Amina acted quickly, but the snow made movement difficult. Dara moved beside her, and together they guided the frightened animal back into safety. In that moment, Amina felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. Dara was not just a helper, he was a partner who shared responsibility, fear, and relief equally. She realized that trust was more than words, it was action, presence, and unwavering support. The storm lasted for 3 full days. By the time it began to ease, Amina and Dara were exhausted, yet there was a quiet triumph in their hearts. They had faced one of the harshest winters they could remember, and they had emerged not only unharmed but stronger. Their house was still standing, the goats were safe, and they had learned to rely on one another in ways that went beyond simple cooperation. Amina felt a renewed sense of confidence and hope. She understood that life would continue to challenge them, but together they could face almost anything. After the storm, the village slowly returned to normal. Paths were cleared, markets reopened, and neighbors came to check on one another. Many villagers came to see Amina, curious about how she and Dara had managed the storm. Some expressed admiration, others cautious curiosity, but Amina no longer worried about opinions. Her focus was on the lessons she had learned. That trust could be built through action, that companionship could strengthen even the most resilient person, and that life's difficulties were easier when shared. In the days that followed, Amina noticed changes in herself. She felt more capable, confident, and open than she had in years. She realized that the storm had not only tested her endurance, but also revealed the depth of her connection with Dara. It was not about romantic notions, but about partnership, trust, and shared responsibility. She appreciated the comfort of having someone by her side who understood her strengths and limitations, and who valued her independence as much as his own presence. Amina also noticed changes in Dara. He had grown protective, not possessive, attentive, not demanding. He respected her routines, asked for her opinions, and worked alongside her as an equal. In this way, they balanced each other. His experience complemented her resilience. His strength complemented her independence. The harsh winter had shown them that partnership was not about control, but about support, understanding, and shared effort. By the time spring approached, the memory of the storm lingered as a reminder of their resilience. They had faced danger, fear, and exhaustion together, and emerged stronger for it. Amina reflected on the lessons learned. That life could be unpredictable, that challenges often tested not just physical endurance but emotional strength, and that true trust required vulnerability and cooperation. Most importantly, she realized that the bond she shared with Dara had grown into something enduring, a connection rooted in respect, reliability, and mutual care. The experience of the storm became a turning point in Amina's life. She understood that life was not only about surviving, but also about embracing the support and companionship that could make survival meaningful. Dara's presence had transformed her solitude into partnership, fear into confidence, and uncertainty into hope. She felt prepared for future challenges, knowing that together they could face whatever came their way. And so, as the mountains bloomed with the first signs of spring, Amina felt a quiet sense of triumph and possibility. She had survived the storm, yes, but more importantly, she had discovered the strength of partnership and the beauty of shared courage. Life would continue to bring challenges, but she now knew that no matter what happened, she would not face them alone. She had found someone who respected her, supported her, and walked beside her through both hardship and hope. The storm had tested their trust, patience, and resilience, and it had proven that even in the harshest conditions, life could be faced with courage when shared. Amina's life had evolved once again. Her home was no longer just a sanctuary of solitude, but a place of connection, trust, and partnership. She had learned that even the coldest, harshest days could bring warmth, not from the sun, but from the presence of someone who truly cared. Little did Amina know, life still had more surprises in store. The challenges they had faced together were only the beginning of a journey that would test the depths of her heart and the strength of her trust. But for now, she could rest in the quiet knowledge that she had grown stronger, braver, and more open to the possibilities of life, companionship, and hope. Spring had finally arrived in the mountains, bringing with it a soft warmth and the first signs of life after a long, harsh winter. Snow melted from the peaks, revealing green hills and sparkling streams that had been hidden beneath ice. The village seemed to awaken with renewed energy. Birds returned, filling the air with songs, and flowers began to peek through the thawed soil. For Amina, the arrival of spring felt like a symbol of change, a renewal not just in nature but in her own life. Her home, once quiet and lonely, now felt alive. Dara continued to work alongside her, and together they cared for the garden, repaired fences, and tended to the goats. But their partnership had grown deeper than shared chores. Amina realized that Dara had become not only a helper, but a true companion, someone she could trust with both her work and her thoughts. They had faced storms, dangers, and long, difficult days, and had emerged stronger together. The bond they shared was no longer tentative or uncertain. It was steady, dependable, and comforting. One morning, as they walked along the mountain path to inspect a distant spring, Amina reflected on the changes in her life. She thought about how alone she had felt for so many years, how she had managed every difficulty on her own, and how daunting life had sometimes seemed. But now, she had someone by her side who offered not control, but support, understanding, and encouragement. Dara had shown her that companionship did not diminish independence, it enhanced it. Together, they had learned to face life's challenges with courage, patience, and trust. As they reached the spring, Dara paused and looked at Amina with a thoughtful expression. "You've taught me much about resilience," he said gently. "I have learned that strength comes not only from skill or experience, but from care, patience, and the courage to continue even when things seem difficult. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met." Amina smiled softly, feeling a warmth in her chest. His words were sincere, but they also reflected the mutual respect that had grown between them over months of shared work and conversation. In the following weeks, their daily routine continued, but it was now filled with small joys that had once seemed unimaginable to Amina. They would share meals together, laughing over simple stories of the village or recalling moments of humor during past hardships. Dara occasionally taught Amina new skills, like how to make simple tools from found materials or how to observe animal behavior more closely. Amina, in turn, shared her knowledge of the village and her garden, showing him the subtle rhythms and secrets she had learned over years of living alone. The villagers began to notice the harmony between them. Some came to admire the way Amina had opened her life to Dara without losing her independence. Children enjoyed seeing them work together, and neighbors occasionally stopped to exchange greetings or offer small gifts of produce from their own gardens. Amina no longer felt the need to worry about what others thought. She had found a rhythm in life that was fulfilling and meaningful, built on trust, shared effort, and quiet understanding. One afternoon, as Amina worked in the garden, Dara approached with a thoughtful expression. "I have been thinking," he said, "about how we have faced challenges together. Life has shown us storms, harsh winters, and long nights, but it has also shown us the value of partnership, trust, and patience. I hope that we can continue to face the future together, whatever it brings." Amina paused, considering his words. She felt a deep sense of clarity. She had grown to trust Dara not only for his skills and strength, but for his respect, patience, and unwavering presence. Amina realized that life was no longer about simply surviving or managing tasks alone. It was about connection, support, and the joy of shared effort. The small moments, the laughter, the shared meals, the quiet conversations by the fire, had taken on new significance. She felt a sense of contentment that had been absent for years. The mountains, once symbols of isolation, now felt like a backdrop to a life rich with companionship and possibility. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky in shades of pink and gold, Amina and Dara sat outside, enjoying the calm after a long day. The goats grazed nearby, and the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers filled the air. Dara spoke softly. "I have come to care for this home, this life, and you, not to change who you are, but to be a part of what you have built. You are strong, independent, and wise. I hope that together we can continue to grow, to face challenges, and to enjoy life's simple joys." Amina felt a quiet joy in her heart. Dara's words reflected the journey they had taken together, from strangers to partners, from caution to trust, from solitude to shared purpose. She realized that life's greatest gifts often arrived unexpectedly, in forms that required patience, openness, and courage. She had learned to trust her own judgment, to embrace companionship without fear, and to recognize the value of shared effort in building a meaningful life. Over time, they began to plan small improvements to the house and garden. Dara suggested adding a small shed to store tools, while Amina proposed planting new vegetables and flowers that could thrive in the changing seasons. Together, they worked side by side, discussing ideas, measuring spaces, and planting seeds. Each day brought small accomplishments, each task reinforcing their partnership. The act of creating and nurturing life together became a source of joy and fulfillment that neither had expected. Amina also began to feel a renewed sense of hope for the future. She thought about what it would mean to live life with someone who respected her independence, shared her burdens, and offered companionship without demands or expectations. She realized that trust and partnership could bring warmth and resilience to life in ways that solitude alone never could. Her heart, once heavy with years of loneliness, now felt lighter, more open, and full of quiet anticipation. The villagers gradually accepted the change as well. They saw the respect, care, and cooperation between Amina and Dara, and they began to view their partnership as a positive example of community and support. Children were encouraged to learn from Amina's knowledge and Dara's experience. Neighbors sought their advice on practical matters, and Amina felt proud not only of her personal growth, but also of the subtle influence she had in her community. One sunny morning, as they repaired a small section of the garden fence, Dara paused and looked at Amina. "I feel that together we have learned much, not only about surviving the mountains but about living fully," he said. "I want you to know that I am grateful for your trust, your patience, and your willingness to share your life with me. I will always respect you, your independence, and the home you have built." Amina smiled, touched by his sincerity. She felt a deep sense of partnership and shared purpose, knowing that their bond was built on respect, trust, and mutual care. Spring turned into summer, and the village bloomed with life. Amina and Dara continued to work, laugh, and share stories. Their days were full of practical work, quiet reflection, and moments of joy. The harsh winters and storms they had faced together were now memories that reminded them of their resilience, courage, and the strength of their connection. Amina felt a sense of fulfillment she had never experienced before. She understood that life's richness came not from solitude or independence alone, but from the willingness to open one's heart to trust, partnership, and companionship. One afternoon, as they sat by the garden watching the sunset over the mountains, Amina reflected on her journey. She had begun alone, carrying the weight of loss, loneliness, and survival. Dara's arrival had brought unexpected change, first through simple acts of help, then through shared trust and care, and finally through partnership that respected her independence. She realized that life was not about being alone or waiting for perfect conditions. It was about embracing opportunity, building connections, and finding meaning in shared experiences. The story of Amina's life had taken a new turn. Her house was no longer a place of solitude, but a home of warmth, trust, and partnership. Her days were no longer marked by quiet loneliness, but by shared work, laughter, and the satisfaction of knowing that she and Dara faced life together. The mountains, once symbols of isolation, now symbolized resilience, growth, and possibility. Amina felt a deep sense of gratitude for her own strength, for Dara's companionship, and for the lessons they had learned together. And so, as the evening settled and stars began to twinkle in the clear mountain sky, Amina stood at her garden, breathing in the cool, fragrant air. She felt a quiet pride in the life she had rebuilt, the partnership she had nurtured, and the hope that the future held. She understood that life would continue to bring challenges, but she no longer feared them. She had learned that trust, care, and companionship could transform solitude into strength, fear into courage, and routine into fulfillment. Amina looked at Dara, standing nearby, and smiled. Their journey together was far from over, but they had built a foundation of trust, respect, and shared experience that could weather any storm. The mountains remained vast and unpredictable, but she no longer felt alone. Life had offered her a gift in the form of unexpected companionship, and she embraced it with an open heart, ready to face the future with courage, hope, and the knowledge that she had found someone who would walk beside her through all seasons of life.